Welcome back to Crime Scene X. Today I will be sharing 4 camping horror stories. If you enjoy, leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe for more scary stories. Our group, comprised of 6 college friends, had always found solace in the embrace of nature. This year, we planned an ambitious trip to the remote wilderness of the Rocky Mountains, a place none of us had ventured to before. There was Lucas, the ever-optimistic leader, Emma, the practical planner, Tyler, the jokester, Zoe, the quiet nature lover, myself, a bit of an anxious overthinker, and Sarah, the free spirit of our group. The journey to our campsite was a mixture of excitement and awe at the untouched beauty of the landscape. The towering mountains, dense forests, and the serene river that flowed beside our chosen campsite were like something out of a painting. We set up our tents in a small clearing, near a bend in the river where the water ran slow and deep. The first day passed in a blur of laughter and exploration. We hiked the nearby trails, marveled at the wildlife, and as night fell, we gathered around the campfire, sharing stories and roasting marshmallows under the starlit sky. It was on the second day that a sense of unease began to creep in. Sarah, who had ventured off alone to sketch the nearby landscapes, a passion of hers, hadn't returned by dusk. Assuming she had lost track of time, we called out her name and waited, but there was no response. As the forest shadows grew longer, our worry deepened. With flashlights in hand, we split into groups to search the area. The dense foliage and the fading light made our search difficult. Hours passed with no sign of Sarah. The chirping of crickets was punctuated by our calls for her, each going unanswered. We regrouped at the campsite, a sense of dread settling over us. The next morning, with the first light of dawn, our grim discoveries began. A few hundred yards from the camp, Lucas found a scrap of Sarah's shirt snagged on a branch. Further on, Emma stumbled upon Sarah's sketchbook, its pages fluttering in the gentle morning breeze. Each page held beautiful, yet unfinished sketches of the landscape around us. It felt as if Sarah had just been there, capturing the beauty of the wilderness. Our search grew more frantic. We expanded our area, combing through the underbrush, calling her name. Midday, Tyler found one of Sarah's hiking boots, perched precariously on a rock beside the river. The discovery was unsettling. It was unlike Sarah to wander barefoot in such rugged terrain. By the 4th day, the authorities had been notified, and a full search operation was underway. Dogs were brought in, and search teams combed the area. But the vastness of the wilderness seemed to swallow any clues as to her whereabouts. Then, in a small clearing not far from our campsite, Zoe, pale-faced and trembling, called us over. There, partially covered by leaves and debris, we found Sarah. Her body lay still, her once vibrant face now lifeless and cold. A deep sense of horror and disbelief washed over us. Near her body, the ground was disturbed, signs of a struggle evident. The authorities later confirmed our worst fears. Sarah had been stabbed, a brutal and senseless act. The investigation that followed was extensive but yielded few answers. The authorities theorized it was a random attack, possibly by a drifter or an unknown hiker with malicious intent. Despite their efforts, the case grew cold, leaving us with a haunting void and endless questions. In the months that followed, our group struggled to come to terms with the loss. The wilderness, once a haven of peace and adventure, now echoed with the tragedy of what had happened. Our trips into nature ceased, replaced by gatherings where we remembered Sarah, her laughter, her love for life, and her untimely departure from this world. The thrill of adventure had always drawn me and my best friend Mike to the most remote wilderness spots. This time, we chose a secluded forest in the Pacific Northwest for our camping trip, a place known for its breathtaking views and serene environment. We arrived just before dusk, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink. Setting up camp beside a clear, gently flowing stream, we laughed and shared stories. The bond of our friendship as strong as ever. The crackling fire and the starry sky above made for a perfect night. But as darkness enveloped the woods, an unsettling feeling crept over me. I noticed a figure at the edge of our campsite, partly hidden behind a tree. Assuming it was just another camper or a park ranger, I called out a friendly hello. The figure didn't respond, just slowly retreated back into the shadows. Mike joked about it, but I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. The next day was filled with hiking and exploring. However, that eerie sensation lingered. Occasionally, I caught glimpses of someone or something moving between the trees, always at the edge of my vision. Mike remained oblivious, caught up in the beauty of nature. As night fell again, our laughter and conversation by the fire were abruptly cut short by a chilling scream from the woods. We jumped to our feet, hearts racing. Mike grabbed a flashlight and we cautiously moved towards the sound. There was nothing. No one. The forest had fallen eerily silent, as if holding its breath. We decided to return to our campsite, but found our tent slashed and our supplies scattered. Fear gripped us. It was clear now. Someone, not something, was stalking us. We debated leaving, but it was too dark and dangerous to navigate the forest at night. We decided to stay by the fire, keeping watch in turns. The hours dragged on, each snap of a twig sending shivers down my spine. In the early hours of the morning, as my eyes fought against sleep, I heard soft footsteps approaching. I nudged Mike awake, and we stood back to back, facing the darkness. A figure emerged from the shadows, a man with a crazed look in his eyes, holding a large knife. He lunged at us, but we were ready. The struggle was chaotic and terrifying. Mike managed to disarm the man, but not before he had inflicted a deep cut on my arm. We restrained him and called for help using our emergency satellite phone. The authorities arrived at dawn. They told us the man was a known fugitive, hiding out in the wilderness. His capture brought relief to a string of unsolved incidents in the area. We returned home, deeply shaken but unbroken. Our bond had been tested in the most horrifying way, but it held strong. The experience taught us the unpredictability of nature, both in its beauty and in its dangers. I had always been drawn to the mystery and isolation of deserts. The vast stretches of sand and sky, the profound silence, and the stark beauty held a certain allure for me. This time, I chose the Mojave Desert for my solo camping adventure. Its expansive dunes and unique wildlife promised a thrilling escape from the bustle of city life. I arrived in the late afternoon, with the sun casting a golden hue over the endless sea of sand. The air was hot and still as I set up my camp near an outcropping of rocks, offering a modicum of shade. The first evening was magical. The sunset painted the sky in shades of red and purple, and as night fell, the desert came alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures. The following day, I ventured further into the desert. The heat was intense, but I was well prepared with plenty of water and protective clothing. I marveled at the rugged beauty of the landscape, taking photographs and noting the diverse plant life. As evening approached, I returned to my campsite. That's when I noticed something odd. Footprints in the sand near my tent. Footprints that were not mine. The nearest campsite was miles away, and the thought of someone else being nearby was unsettling. That night, I slept uneasily. The silence of the desert was broken by the sound of soft footsteps outside my tent. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out, but the light revealed nothing but the endless stretch of sand and the dark silhouettes of the distant mountains. The next day, I discovered more signs of an unseen visitor. My food supplies had been disturbed, and some items were missing. I felt a growing sense of paranoia. Was someone watching me, playing a twisted game? My anxiety peaked that evening. As darkness enveloped the desert, I heard a voice, a low, raspy whisper carried by the wind. It was impossible to make out the words, but the menacing tone was unmistakable. I realized then that I was not alone. Panic set in, and I decided to leave at first light, but the desert night had more terror in store. The whispering continued, circling around my tent, sometimes far, sometimes uncomfortably close. I could hear soft, dragging footsteps, and at one point a shadow loomed over my tent before disappearing into the night. I barely slept, and as soon as the first light of dawn broke the horizon, I packed my gear and left. The journey back to my car felt agonizingly long, every rustle of wind sending a jolt of fear through me. When I finally reached the safety of my car, I noticed something that stopped me cold, a piece of old, tattered cloth tied to the antenna. The message was clear. I had been watched, followed, and toyed with. I reported the incident to the park rangers, who speculated it might have been a homeless person living in the desert, or perhaps someone with ill intent. They promised to investigate, but I never heard if they found anything. I'd always loved the great outdoors, the tranquility of nature, the chorus of birds and the rustling leaves. This time, I decided to explore the dense forests of the Appalachian Trail, a long-time dream of mine. As an experienced camper, I was well prepared with gear, supplies, and my trusty compass. The first day was everything I had hoped for. The sun cast golden beams through the tall trees, and the evening brought a cool, soothing breeze. I set up my tent in a small clearing, cooked a simple meal over my portable stove, and settled in, the sounds of the forest lulling me into a peaceful sleep. But the serenity was short-lived. The second night, I woke to a rustling sound outside my tent. Thinking it was just a small animal, I tried to ignore it. But the rustling grew louder, more frantic. I grabbed my flashlight, unzipped the tent, and shone the light around. Nothing, just the dense trees and the darkness beyond. The next morning I found footprints around my campsite, too large to be any small forest animal. Unease crept into my mind, but I pushed it aside, attributing it to a passing deer, or perhaps a small bear. As I continued my trek, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Twigs snapped in the distance, and several times I thought I caught a glimpse of something moving between the trees. Every time I looked, there was nothing there. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of fear and frustration. On the fourth night, the terror escalated. I woke up to find my tent being shaken violently. I yelled, thinking to scare off whatever animal had decided to harass me. The shaking stopped abruptly, and there was a heavy silence. Holding my breath, I listened, but heard nothing except my own racing heartbeat. In the morning, my campsite was a mess. Supplies were scattered, and there were deep scratches on the tree trunks. The footprints from before were everywhere, encircling my tent. I decided to cut my trip short and head back. As I hurriedly packed, I heard a low, guttural growl from the edge of the clearing. I froze, my eyes scanning the trees. There, between two thick trunks, I saw a pair of eyes staring back at me, reflecting a sinister intelligence. It wasn't a bear or any animal I recognized. I grabbed my backpack and ran. I didn't stop to look back, even as I heard heavy footsteps pursuing me. The forest, once a place of peace, had become a labyrinth of terror. I ran until my lungs burned, the sound of my pursuer fading into the distance. When I finally emerged from the woods, exhausted and traumatized, I reported my experience to the local authorities. They searched the area but found nothing. No trace of the creature that had stalked me. No explanation for what had happened. I still love the outdoors, but I can't bring myself to go camping alone again. There's something out there in the forests, something unseen and unknown, and the memory of its eyes watching me haunts my dreams. Thanks for watching. See you all next time.